My name is Nancy Boren. I'm the Director of Elections and Voter Registration here in Muscogee County.
And I'm Marc Nolan. I'm a resident of Cherokee County and been in the state of Georgia for about 34 years.
All right.
Thank you very much for seeing me, allowing me to come down. It was a nice long drive from Cherokee County. Wasn't too bad. How I structure my questions, they're really just going to be about, first I want to find out how long you've been here. So how long have you worked for the Elections Board here in Muscogee County? And did you start in this role? And any previous background in working for the county would be helpful to help me out with the questions I'm going to ask. Making sure you weren't just a French fry manager at Wendy's last month and decided to come over here.
That's right. I've been a city employee for 35 years. My first job with the city was as deputy coroner.
Okay.
I always say that doesn't qualify me for my work in elections
Right.
because we don't allow most dead people to vote. Some.
Chicago.
Right. So deputy coroner for 9 years. I was affirmative action officer for 2 years.
Okay.
And I have been in the elections office since December of 1995.
1995. So you've been around here for a while.
26 years
Awesome.
in elections.
Okay.
Been around the block
Been
a
around
couple
the
of
block,
times with
and a
elections.
long block, I guess it looks like,
Yes.
right? And I know that we have 158 others like yourself throughout the state in a role very similar to yours in the state of Georgia. And with that, I would probably think you and the other 158 people all have the same level of experience. Some may be newer, some may be longer serving. Is that about right? Is the average length, is there a 10-year length, a 5-year length? Are the every county different, who they hire and backgrounds they look for in people?
Every county is different, and every county resource is different. You know, some resources, some counties resource their elections process very heavily. Some don't. You have a probate judge who conducts some elections. In some counties, you have boards of elections that are the superintendents. And then you have people like myself who've kind of been a core group for 20 years or more until the 2020 election. And then we saw a lot of retirements and people starting to think, is this really what I want to do?
Right, okay, well thank you. So you've seen a lot of different processes over the 25, 26, 30 years. So I see that you were selected by Secretary of State Raffensperger to be the state's director for the the NAVA and the EAC standards group. And can you tell us what that group does and why you were selected by Mr. Raffensperger over the under 158 people?
So the federal law that creates the standards board has 2 people per state representing that state. Typically it's a Republican and a Democrat. Because we don't register by party in Georgia, you have to kind of look at someone's voting history to see, maybe how they lean. I do come from a Democratic leaning county, and so I was appointed on the basis of that and the fact that I had 25 years of experience.
Okay. So what is your overall role here in the county as it relates to like voter integrity rules and any software or hardware that you've looked at over the years and that you've deployed maybe prior to you being on the SAFE Commission and that you serve on? Basically my meaning is what experience you have from your county and any of the problems that have taken place, since I believe you're mostly a liberal leaning or Democrat leaning county, and we hear so much about voter suppression. And from what I've read, my data, it says that Muscogee County is pretty much 65, 67% Democrat leaning and haven't voted for a Republican for president since 2000. Am I about right there?
You're about right.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that, do you believe there's voter suppression in the state of Georgia, or do you believe that's just a talking point for people to say, hey, we have problems here, and it's almost like the nasty word,
So
voter suppression?
I need to unpack your question because there's a lot in there. What do you think is voter integrity? Let's look at voter integrity. Is it voter integrity or is it system integrity that you want me to talk about?
If you could do both. Voter integrity is one, because there's some questions I have around that, but systems integrity is where I'm really going with that question.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit of the history of Muscogee County as far as I know it. I took this position in December of 1995 We implemented a new voting system in 1996, and I was responsible for that implementation.
Okay.
It was the optical scan voting where you completed the arrow on the ballot.
Got it.
And it was first time used in the presidential preference of 1996.
Okay.
We used it until 2000. In the 2000 presidential election, if you're not familiar with hanging chads,
Oh, yes.
you would be the only person who didn't know about
Right.
hanging chads.
Right.
Presidential election 2000 rolled around. 2001, the state decided, look, we need to unify and have a uniform voting system. 2001, there was a committee put together, and the touchscreen voting that you might be aware of through ES&S was implemented in 2002. So I implemented that second type of voting system. And then the third one, of course, is the Dominion system that we have now. There's not a perfect system when it comes to voting because you have humans and you have humans involved in the entire process, first on the voter side as well as on the election administrator side. So how you protect that is through processes and procedures that we've put in place, hopefully to protect that whole integrity, the testing, and the performance of the equipment so that we can assure voters when they ask questions like this.
Okay, thank you. Leading up to the SAFE Commission and the volunteer work that you did, do you believe that the ES&S system was in fact broken and the state needed to a new system put in place, especially in light that many of the voting systems, in the U.S., over 70% of them have been implemented by ES&S?
So the federal standard required a paper backup or a paper copy or some kind of paper verification for a voter to look at their ballot that the ES&S, the legacy ES&S system that we had here in Georgia did not provide. So I knew that there needed to be an update to the type of system that we had. Voters loved the system that we had.
Yeah, correct. That's
Yeah. And they thought it was easy. They had become accustomed to it. It did not provide, though, a paper copy for someone who is disabled or blind, but they could hear their ballot. It was an audio ballot, and they could navigate on a keypad. So, everything ages out. It was a 20-year-old system, basically, and I'm sure there had been security and software upgrades that needed to be done, and I'm sure that's why the state decided to do that.
Okay. And some of these questions that I'm asking may be more germane to Secretary of State Raffensperger or Sterling, so thank you for that. And I know that the curling versus Kemp thing started its own little areas. So critics have claimed that since prior to the purchase of the old ESS system in 2002, that was not verifiable, auditable, transparent, or truly recount capable. Are they right or wrong?
So if you look at the entire process, we test every piece of equipment before it goes to the field. It has to produce an errorless result. We have a pre-audited set of votes that we know that machine should produce. If it does not produce that result, then that machine is put away and it is not deployed to the field. So you have testing. You don't have anything that the voter can audit. When you hit that cast ballot button on that ES&S equipment, you have to trust the system. And we know that there is, at this point, no trust in basically any system. Although voters didn't really think about that. Most voters trusted the process with the old equipment. They trusted the process. They went and cast their ballots and they moved on and didn't even think about it. And then all of the uproar started in 2018. 2019, we started looking at new equipment in the SAFE Commission, and I think the equipment had just aged out. And that federal requirement of needing something that a voter can then look at or audit was something that was required.
Okay, so it was a federal issue basically, as opposed to a states' right issue, saying, hey, we're going to put our own system in place. Now, is that across the United States where every organization has to deal with the federal over states? So states' rights they're not really states' rights, they're pretty much states' rights until the federal government says, no, we're going to do it our way.
Right, there are federal voting standards that we have to abide by.
And everything else, right?
Yes.
It's federal, all kinds of stuff, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. So were you involved in the selection of the ES&S system prior to the implementation? and then the Dominion, the new system, and were you involved with when Governor Barnes had his 21st Century Commission, which led to the, and I call them stovepipe systems. Okay, I'm a technology guy, so when I see 4 systems, and I think they were disparate, meaning they were all stovepiped. They may say I'm wrong, but back in 2000, a lot of things were stovepiped.
Oh, yeah.
So who made that recommendation? Was there a technology board that said, hey, we're just going to put these 4 systems in place, and hopefully there's some interfaces we're going to be able to build or not build? And how were those elections? I mean, how were those votes from 2001 up to 2006 or 2007, 2008? Were there a lot of problems with that system back then?
All right, so let me go back, talking about the stovepipe. In 1995, when I was appointed, the previous director had selected the type of voting system. The previous director and the board had selected the type of voting system that Muscogee County would implement. There were different systems in all 159 counties at that point.
Wow.
And so there was no consistency. Yeah, no standard. We all had our own rules, and we did this and we did that. That was from 96 until 2000. In 2000, I remember Kathy Cox standing up at the end of the election saying, you know, Florida could have been us because we had just as high of an error rate on ballots as Florida did. And she knew then that a 21st Century Vote Commission needed to be implemented. Of course, she didn't name it at that point, but there was a commission implemented to find a uniform voting system for the state of Georgia. And that commission, I was not on that commission. Not involved in that selection at all, did give us the ES&S touchscreen voting that we had, the electronic voting, I guess we should call it that instead of ES&S, the electronic voting that we had beginning in 2001 through 2018.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you very much for that.
And then the last part of your question, I was on the committee that looked at the proposals for this statewide voting equipment. There were a variety of people on that committee. I was one of 2 election officials on that committee. They wanted kind of the elections perspective, but there were people from the Department of Administrative Services, there were tech people, there were disability people who all fed into that evaluation process.
Okay. Thank you. Outside of, so from going back from the federal, you talked about the federal side of the house, how much weight does HAVA and EAC come from a standards where you say, hey, we're part of a standards organization. We now are a federal organization of 50 statewide elected people with our governor or with whoever else, secretaries of state. So how much of that decision is made? My question is, I'm really interested to find out why we can't, when I say we, I mean we, the United States, can't have one single system that has not a hodgepodge, you know, of things. Dominion has this, ESS has this, their ballot has this, Joe Blow's voting system has this, you know. They all seem to have different things. Do you find it frustrating at all in your role on a standards committee that the standard are not existent? I mean, they're just not. I mean, Hawaii's got one, New Jersey's got another one. Voting rights are different. You know, there are times people come in, then you got judges coming in back and forth. So do you or other directors like yourself get frustrated when you have your calls or Zoom calls or whatever, meetings, to say, why can't we have a standard system across the United States? Why can't we have one standard that meets all these needs, and we're going to write one RFP for every organization out there, and that's all it's going to be for the next 4 years or 10 years?
So I think we do have to look at states' rights, obviously. You know, states' rights have those options of picking their voting equipment that the feds aren't going to tell them to do. The feds do certify voting systems, and that's through an organization, NIST.
Yep.
Don't ask me what it stands for.
I know this.
Yeah. So NIST, you know, certifies software, firmware, everything that is used in the voting process. I know the state of Georgia did not look at any type of or any company that didn't have that approval through NIST and through the federal voting standards.
Okay. Thank you. When ES&S system was implemented, were there any problems with it during any of the elections in the past? And if so, Do you know where they were and if there was an implementation manager who oversaw that contract?
So I don't know who oversaw that contract, but I do know that Michael Barnes was involved in that.
Okay.
And I think you'll be talking to him later.
Right.
I know Michael was involved from the ground up with the old ES&S voting equipment. He headed was with the Center for Election Systems at Kennesaw before it was disbanded. Problems, I mean, you might have a touch screen that might not work. You might have a touch screen that apparently flips votes, but that was because of a testing issue that an elections official, perhaps didn't calibrate the screen.
Okay.
You have a calibration process that's part of the logic and accuracy testing that you go through to ensure that it counts appropriately.
It's very similar to software.
Right.
We test it all the time.
Right. So yeah, I know that there were problems like that. I know there were software fixes that needed to be done, but you think about the lifespan of that voting equipment. It was an 18-year lifespan.
Right.
So there were some enhancements that were made through
Right.
that 18-year period.
And here's a question that I just thought of in relation to that. In every software implementation I've ever been involved in, and it's over 25 of major, big implementations, worldwide implementations of what we call ERP. There are always enhancements to the system, okay? And we call them user enhancements, okay? So we take the user, in this case, it could either be the voter or it could be a direction to an election official like yourself says, hey, you know what? Next year, we want to have these enhancements done. We've seen other places that had these enhancements, so we're going to add a new enhancement to it. So were there upgrades that were done inside the old ES&S system, and do you have a contract with them to say, okay, next year we want to make sure we have these things. Here's some of the things that our users, meaning our voters, are telling us they want to have, whether it's ADA compatibility or if it's...
Right, so part of it is once it's certified through that national certification or that federal certification, any change to that certification then has to go back and be recertified and approved for implementation. So they test it, they try to break it, from software, they test it, try to break it, make sure that it works in stressful situations and not stressful situations. And so that testing takes time, so it's not immediate. There may be suggestions, but it's not immediate because again, it has to be certified through NIST and through those other federal certification areas. So the upgrades that were done took time. We couldn't call up and say, hey, we really want the machine to do this. Can it do it? And that happened.
Okay.
The second thing I was going to say too is a national voting system. Can you imagine the firmware, the computer, the hardware, the voting machines that would be necessary for that? And I don't know that there's a company that's robust enough to do that at this point.
Okay. And we could put a man on the moon.
True,
but we can't
absolutely.
make sure that our voters are squared away every time. Right?
And then yeah.
I mean, dead people shouldn't be voting, but we still have them. I mean, I don't know where they vote from, but.
So dead people vote sometimes because if they submit their absentee ballot and we receive it and we accept it in the system and they die before election day, we are going to count that ballot.
Okay,
So
fair enough. I'm talking about the dead people that come up on the rolls afterwards, and I know Governor Kemp got in a lot of heated discussions about that. 2018, there was a lot of people saying, well, he's taking people off the rolls and stuff like that. Well, for various reasons, but some of them had been dead apparently. But I'll get to that question in a second for you. Sticking with the RFP, what percentage of RFP was driven by the working group that you and others were on, the SAFE Commission? Because I saw you did some recommendations, and I realized that the SAFE Commission is really, it's almost like an adjunct recommendator for the state of Georgia, if I understand the Senate and the House Representatives there. So Governor Kemp started that back in 2017, and the recommendations from SAFE and Chris Harvey, and secondly, from what I read, the SAFE Commission overview you and your team used HAVA's National Technical Guideline Development Committee for the VVSG.
VVSG, right.
And some from NIST, 1.0 guidelines. So this is important to me because, as I said, I've been asked to have an open mind, which I hope I bring to the table. And try not to, and I'm not trying to go back and forth to have all these people at the Capitol saying one thing, somebody else saying something else. I'm not here to argue that area. But what did you think of the other systems the Safe Commission looked at, such as Clear Ballot? Do you remember that one?
Clear Ballot, I do. Clear Ballot was a great option, although they did not have any poll pad. They didn't have an electronic numbered list, and I'm not sure that their software had been certified just yet. If you look back to 2017 and the Safe Commission is different from the commission that looked at the technical proposals that were sent. So, you know, there was a bid, there was an RFP,
right,
and the bid went out, and Safe Commission did not look at the RFPs or the bid. So Safe Commission was just a group that met, public hearings, input from voters, what do you want? Do you want new equipment? Whatever. It was more of a public-driven movement. And then the RFP technical committee really looked at the RFPs that had been submitted. The RFP was written, maybe 4 or 5 companies that applied on that RFP, and then I was on the committee, as well as Safe Commission, I was on the committee that reviewed the RFP.
Okay, so you mentioned poll pad, Clear Ballot didn't have poll pads, but
Dominion
doesn't
didn't
have
either,
poll pads either, right?
But they had partnered
They had partnered with them.
Correct.
So they could have, if
Sure.
Clear Ballot was smart enough, they would have
Right,
built an interface or gotten with the people from
that's right,
the poll pad company. Okay.
that's right.
Were you aware that Hart Interactive's bid was rejected because the data entry got hung up in an anticipated procurement system, antiquated? Even Gabe Sterling says this, antiquated procurement system, and it was completed like 2 minutes late, and they wouldn't take the bid.
I was.
Okay. Was there any kind of heartache about that? I mean,
Of course.
did anybody say like, well, you know, it wasn't really our fault. You got an
Right.
antiquated system from, you know, when Abe Lincoln was around. Maybe not
Of
that old,
course. I mean, but you know, we were a couple of people on a committee,
Right.
and then we had a hard driver purchasing person who said they didn't need it. They just didn't need it.
Okay. Hopefully that's been rectified. Hopefully somebody in procurement
Yeah.
has said, you know, we're not going to let this happen to a vendor again.
Again, that would be a state question. I don't
yeah,
know.
I got it.
Yeah.
So I hear this, and this is a question I hear from the political side of the house, okay? Did any vendor have any input into the RFP, as some politicians have suggested? For instance, Democratic Senator Sally Harrell, who went on the Senate floor and said, don't let Georgia get sucked in by vendors who are thirsty for the biggest contract in the U.S. for what is brand new technology, okay, that might not last the 10 years that we needed.
So did vendors have
Did any
input
vendor- yes.
to the RFP process?
Yes.
Or?
To the RFP process.
And again, I don't know the knowledge, I don't know how they formulated the RFP. I don't know how they came up with that. I was just on the committee to review the proposals that were submitted under the RFP.
Right.
That might be a Gabe.
That might be a Gabe or Raffensperger.
Or Michael question.
Or Michael
Yeah.
question. Okay. And I actually wrote that down. So you may not know this answer either. The contract, when you were part of the Safe Commission, did you have any input into how the $107 million is going to be dispersed from the contract standpoint?
Right, so the Safe Commission wasn't involved in that at all.
Okay.
The evaluation team for the RFP. And did we have any input in that? No.
Okay. Would you have liked to have input into that?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that would be another change. Maybe
Yes.
the next governor or the next Secretary of State or Mr. Raffensperger moving forward might want to say, hey, look, here's some things we may want to look at
Yes.
down the road.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know why the Secretary of State ignored the recommendations to include in the RFP voter-oriented selection criteria such as voter variability, completeness, and clarity of ballots, et cetera? There was some document I read that he didn't take that into consideration. Do you know why?
Clarity of ballot?
Yeah.
So are you talking about a hand-marked paper ballot
correct.
rather than voted by a touch screen?
Touch screen, right.
Yeah. So I think part of it was the disability component. You know, people who are disabled need to be able to touch on that ballot. They can't necessarily write. They like being able to touch. I think that was a component. That was a strong component from the person that was on the RFP committee with me, is disabled voters need to be able to vote independently. The voter verified, I don't know how you would do that without some kind of mechanism to read. I'm sure there's a way.
Biometrics, I would think, is a good way to
Maybe
verify it, right?
Biometrics like eye scan
Eyes,
or
thumbs, voice. You know, there's a lot of technology that's got biometrics associated with it. I mean, I'm surprised because NIST is really a big biometrics.
So I think you have to
company.
look at the state of Georgia too, and I think you have to look at rural areas that may not even have Wi-Fi capability,
Sure.
you know, may not have computers at their precincts, or, you know, so I think you have to look at the state as a whole when you look at technology.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. Okay, thank you. I grew up living in New Jersey. I grew up as a Democrat in a very Democrat household. My father was a politician. We had 3 to 4 different Democrat governors at our house on probably 15 or 20 occasions.
Oh, wow.
I worked for the Speaker of the House of New Jersey as a Democrat.
So why aren't you on the Board of Elections in Cherokee County?
No one's really asked me. You know, and I
Wow.
actually have some questions about that because I went to be a poll analyst.
Right.
And are we still rolling?
Yeah, we're good to go. Yep, you're good.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
That's okay. It's fine, you can.
So can I complete this sentence? So when I went after the election, to Annie's point about the election about 2020, I was like, you know what, I got to go check my own stuff out. I got to
Right.
check Cherokee County.
Sure.
You know, I want to hear Muscogee County, if it would have been 70-30,
Right.
Donald Trump over Joe Biden, you were like, okay, there's a problem here.
Right.
So I said, I'm going to go become a poll analyst up in Cherokee County. And I went through the whole thing. Well, within 5 minutes, we're sitting there, and it's God's honest truth. And I forget the election lady's name up there. It's a young lady. I said to this one guy, I said, you know that box right there, when you turn it over, it's not sealed. Well, it's sealed at the top.
It's got.
I said, again, I'm not the smartest guy in the world,
Yeah.
but it's not sealed in the bottom.
Right.
So when you open, and I'm telling this guy, I said, look, it's unperforated. You can open it up here.
Yeah.
And he didn't say, he's like, well, you know, they have to go that. I said, all right, forget it, pal. And I told the lady, I said,
Right.
so, and I've been involved in not politics, but I'm an
Right.
outspoken, I would consider myself an advocate. Not a,
That's what we need.
well, I know we do.
need an advocate.
I know, but you know, I'm an old guy, so you know, my
Well,
wife wants to
you're
stay
not
away
old.
from politics.
So it doesn't have to be politics.
No,
Advocating
I'd
is
rather
not
be-
political.
No, I've done stuff in Woodstock.
Right.
I give politicians a hard time in Woodstock. You can see there's videos of me out there hammering these people all day long in Cherokee County all day long.
But you're not giving us a hard time. You're making us think critically.
I'm trying to. I'm just
Right.
trying to think outside the box.
Sure.
Questions, and so.
And that's always great. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you. So how was the commission different from the commission that Governor Barnes held in the 21st century voting? I mean, what was did they make recommendations back then like y'all did in your commission, or was it a different time and different things?
It was pretty much the same thing.
Same
so
thing.
the 21st Century Vote Commission was very similar to the SAFE Commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They made recommendations. You know, we need a uniform system. We need statewide equipment and rules, and then everybody can abide by the same thing.
Okay. Did the commission recommend that a new voter registration system be implemented? As now I read that the Secretary of State is moving forward with the purchase of a new voter registration system. And in partnership, supposedly, with Salesforce and a company called MTX Group. Okay. Which, in checking their website, MTX's website, I see no current voter registration systems have been implemented. So what to me means, what that means to me is MTX Group has no voter registration technology background. They're going to implement a new voter registration system. So we just had Dominion, a new system, okay? Now we're going to have this. Did anybody give any input, meaning, I don't know if this came out of Mr. Raffensperger's office or somebody else's office, And was there an RFP from that? Did this come out of the Safe Commission, where you guys said we need a new voter registration system?
So it did not come out of the Safe Commission, but what it did come from is that 2020 election.
Awesome.
If you think back to Columbus Day, when you had lines around buildings, it's because there was a huge turnout. It was Columbus Day. People wanted to vote, get it behind them, and ENET, which is our operating system for voter registration, slowed down to nothing. We couldn't move people, we couldn't process them quickly, we had to switch to an alternate method to do it, and I had a line around this building, looped all the way around the natatorium, all the way back to the parking garage for 3 days as they tried to beef up the infrastructure to handle the turnout that we had on Columbus Day and those 2 days following. For that presidential election, it was huge. And so at that point, I think it was determined that we need to do something. We either need to make this system better or we need to get a new one. And I was not involved in the negotiations or the decision to do it. Obviously, for an election official, implementing new voter registration or new elections equipment in an election year is difficult. And we are on a very short time frame for doing it. We have qualifying that starts March 7th. We have redistricting and reapportionment, and that was all delayed because census data was delayed. And so for elections officials, it's crunching everything into just a couple of months. But what we don't want to do for the voters is have those lines again, either for the primary in May or for the general election in November. And we have been told that ENET just doesn't have the functionality for us as elections officials any longer.
Okay. So, but why these three? Or why Salesforce.com? And I worked for Oracle many years ago. So, why Salesforce.com, and why this MTX group? Why them specifically? And was there I didn't see any bid on DOAS on this. Was it sole sourced? And if it was sole sourced, why was it sole sourced?
And I don't know any of those questions. I have just recently learned that Salesforce is kind of a platform.
It is.
Yeah, I've just learned that in this process. So I do not know how any of that was chosen, if there was a bid or any of that specific information.
Does that concern you that there's a new vendor? There's a new software, there's a new registration, a new voter registration. So you brought up Columbus Day, oh my gosh, these kind of issues. Now, now we're going to have another new system that hasn't been tried.
Right.
I'm sure that they're going to have some testing going on again. They're going to pick some counties and do a conference room pilot, blah, 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 supposedly. But you're against the clock on this one. You're running against the clock on this one. So I'm just surprised that they're, there's a press release that says, hey, we got a new thing going on and everything's going to be wonderful.
So I did tell the state I needed a security blanket. I'm sure other counties did that too.
Right.
So our old system will go along with the new system as we progress through the new system. So as long as I have my security blanket to go back to, ENET, then I'm okay
So you're
with
going to
something
run.
new.
Are they going to run parallel?
They will.
So they're both going to be live.
Yes.
Right, and then at some point in time, there's going to be an end of life for ENET, and they're going to come off a contract.
That's
and
right.
Off everything else, and then this new thing is going to come in place.
That's right. And
Okay,
as long as
awesome.
I have that safety blanket, as elections officials, we learn what can go wrong will, and so we always have redundancies built into whatever we do.
Okay.
And if it's a paper list that we have to print, and then the voter we have to check them on that paper list, and that's what we do. I mean, we go back to 20 years ago.
Right.
So,
Right, and that's what I said. There's the lessons learned from 20 years ago. If we don't learn those lessons, we're going to keep on having the same problems, and that's what I think.
That's right.
What my problem was with the 2020 election was, we know we've had problems in the past for 20 years, and that's where I'm going to it with these set of questions. I noticed in doing my research that in the overview, initially there was 9 counties that were going to be part of this conference room pilot, this pilot program. There's 6 that came out of it, right? And it was Bacon, Bartow, Carroll, Catoosa, Decatur, Evans, Lowndes, Paulding, and Trulin? Trulin, okay. But even though those 3, the last 3, backed out because there was no municipal elections.
right.
Now, from my technology background, when we do a major implementation of a big implementation, we do a pilot as opposed to a big bang implementation. So a big bang implementation is, here's the software, we're going to throw it all in there, we're the technology people, we're the consultants, we're going to tell you what to do, and then we're going to leave.
Yes.
Well, that's usually horrible. People pull their hair out, you know,
Sure.
they go crazy, and usually end up on the front of some computer magazine saying how horrible
Yes.
it was. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a white paper called ERP implementations based on the dating game, the newlywed game, and divorce court.
Okay.
So it takes you through the
That's
whole
right.
thing that goes on. And it
That's
was at
right.
the city of Charlotte, believe it or not.
Okay.
A major lawsuit that we actually won. So my question is, why were they picked for the RFP pilot program?
So you kind of answered your own question. It was an odd-numbered year, and it was a general election in an odd-numbered year. Here in Muscogee County, we are a consolidated city-county government. We hold elections under the county schedule, and so that's an even-numbered year. So we didn't have an election in November of 2019 that they could have piloted here in Muscogee County. And then you said the other 3 counties dropped out because they didn't have a candidate to qualify.
Sure.
So the pool of available counties to do that pilot was probably very small.
Okay, fair enough. But, so this leads to my question. From the research I've done, and from the press releases, and from the political noise, you know, about the problem children, not my words. I think either it was Gabe Sterling said that, or maybe Raffensperger or somebody else. We always have these problem children. DeKalb County, Fulton County, sometimes it's Gwinnett, sometimes it's Cobb, sometimes it's others. Okay. Why would you not? And this is, and again, I go back to, you talk about 2020. There's 20 years. We have probably data that says we've had problems in Fulton County for many years, or in certain subsects of Fulton County, certain precincts.
Right.
And in Decatur, and in Gwinnett, Cobb County. We don't have those issues usually in Cherokee County, or we don't have those issues maybe down here in your county. So if we know we have these problem children, I have 2 children, both of them are grown, thank God, off my payroll. But if we know we have problem children in DeKalb County and Fulton County for years, why didn't we put them into the pilot program?
Why didn't we
Why didn't
put
we?
them? So if you have a project that you want to complete and you want it completed so that you can evaluate it appropriately, would you assign it to your problem child?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the only way you're going to find out that those problems don't become problem children second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time. So in a conference room pilot, and I'm not saying take all of Fulton County. I'm not saying take all of Gwinnett or all of DeKalb or all of Cherokee County or all of Cobb County. I'm saying if you have specific precincts inside a county, and I'm addressing Fulton right now because it seems like there's a lot of issues. And I know Rob Pitts personally. He sat on my board at one time. So we go back a long time. If we know we have problems, why didn't we take something in Fulton County and say, okay, we're going to issue the training, we're going to help you out here, we're going to give you HAVA funds, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to do all these kind of things to make sure that on the election day and on election night, or the week after that, that we don't have these problems. To me, I think that's a bad, to me, that's a deficiency in the implementation person, manager who did that. Not knowing, or knowing that you have a problem child and not doing anything about it, the problem child is never going to go away. It's just still going to, you're just going to point to it again. And I think that was some of the problems in those counties. So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about why do we always have to have, it's 2 o'clock, it's 4 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock the next day, you know, all these issues going on in Fulton County. I don't know. You might know better than me.
Yeah, and I don't know that I know 100%, but maybe I know a little bit. You know, if you take it to a county who normally doesn't fall into that category that you just described, they're going to come up with processes and procedures that are going to be easy to replicate. And I'm not sure that Fulton County ever conducts an election that's the same. You know, they may have municipalities and they may have problems with staffing, or they may have problems with warehouses, whereas if you back it back just a little bit to areas that are not metro Atlanta, you might be able to look at processes and procedures and study them. That's just kind of off the top of my head. I don't really know why maybe the metros weren't chosen. Maybe it's the sheer number of people or registered voters that are in those metro Atlanta areas.
Right, and that's why I was saying you could just take a precinct level inside of Fulton County. I'm Joe Blow, the average person, right? So, and I'm not saying that everybody inside of those in the state's going, why do we always have a problem with Fulton County? Right. And they're not my words. That's the Secretary of State's words. You know, and Mr. Sterling, of course, we have a problem, child. It's just Fulton County. My question is, why don't you fix that problem, child, at some point in time?
Right. So I think too, it doesn't matter how well we do. If Metro Atlanta doesn't do well in conducting their elections, then we're all evaluated on that same template.
Absolutely, I agree
right?
with you.
And if you were a candidate running for an office and they wanted to do a pilot in one of the precincts in which your name appeared on the ballot, how would you feel about that? If you lost, would you challenge the election, you know, because of that one precinct?
Yeah.
Right, because now you've got a candidate. If you were the candidate running and you lost by 15 votes, it would be because there was a problem in that pilot precinct.
Correct.
And so, I think there are a lot of various things that you have to look at.
Okay. It's funny because, getting to my point, I was listening to one of Bill Nygut did
me too.
He was on a show with Gabe Sterling and a couple other people that morning, a couple of reporters, here we are voting. And Raffensperger, Secretary of State Raffensperger said about Fulton and DeKalb for years in a podcast I heard with Bill Nygut and some AG Figs folks. Even Sterling said that as far back as 2013, he tweeted that there are problems inside of Fulton County. So again, being the average Joe Blow, if we know that's an issue, if you were the person that was dealing with Fulton County, if you were John Barron, Rick Barron, sorry, I have a friend named John Barron. If you were Rick Barron, and I think he resigned, but I think he's still on a contract now.
Yeah.
Kind of strange. He resigned, got a contract, probably okay. But if you had the history, I'm asking you personally, if you had the history of what you know goes on in Fulton County, would you stay here all that time, not knowing? Because you seem like a person who is a taskmaster, wanting to get things done. You see a problem, you know it's going to be a problem. You're looking at the rearview mirror, it's coming at me, but you also have the foresight from the forward standpoint, being here 25 years. We know we have these problems. Would you let those problems exist in Fulton County if you were the elections?
I would not if I could handle it, but I'm in such a different arena here. I mean, I have 135,000 registered voters.
Sure.
So I know my poll workers, I know my precinct managers, I know my advanced voting workers, their neighbors, friends. Most of my precinct managers have been in place, 10 years. I have a partnership with our local high school to get high school students to come in to work. I mean, I know my people, and I can't imagine that Rick actually knows a lot of his people. We see reports almost every election of precincts not opening on time, and I can't imagine that. I don't understand that because we have a kind of multi-level. We have an area manager that supervises precincts, and they have to hear from those or precinct managers, we're open, we're up, we're ready to go. If they don't, then they go to that location and they operate that poll until they figure out what happens. We don't want to be on that front page of, well, Muscogee County didn't open until 8 o'clock. But I can't imagine the challenges faced with COVID either, and the illnesses and all of that. We were extremely lucky because, again, I had a partnership with our local high school that had been in place since 2008. We pulled hundreds of high school students, not only to do our absentee process, but to work our polls. And they weren't in school. It kept them busy. They got a paycheck. It was a win-win for everyone.
I agree with you. Now, in the 2020 election,
Yay.
I'm sure you know Mr. Russell down here.
Mr. Russell. Oh, Alton.
Alton Russell, who seemed to believe that nearly 4,000 residents in your county were not what he thought were legitimate. I also know that Stacey Abrams' sister was the presiding judge. Interestingly enough, who didn't recuse herself. Can you let us know where that case finally closed on? I haven't been able to find it. What the results of that, and here's the question. This is the question. It's a two-in-one set question. Instead of Andy, when Andy asked me this question about being open-minded, I said, you know what gets me is that instead of getting a judge involved, let alone Stacey Abrams' sister, right, who's got her own view of the world, she's a judge, and lawyers and lawsuits, Alton filed a lawsuit against you guys, blah, 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 whatever it was. Wouldn't it have been just as easy for you and Mr. Russell who don't agree on these voter rolls, wouldn't it have been a simple thing just to look at the national voter registration form and then to compare it to what and you and he had? Meaning, instead of going on to these various, open meetings about this and that and this, wouldn't it have been easier to say, hey, Mr. Russell, I'll tell you what, why don't you come on down, sit down with me, we'll have an hour discussion, have a cup of coffee, you take your 4,203 votes, you think are illegitimate, and I'll match them up right here. Why wouldn't that be an easier way to go as opposed to you having to go back on camera again or having to go to a judge and having more politicians get involved in it and screaming matches at the Capitol? Because that's what I think the voter doesn't want to see anymore. We don't want to hear the Capitol where it's going back and forth.
Right. So as you know, I'm the director. The 5-member Board of Elections is the superintendent of elections, and so they make decisions regarding challenges and candidate challenges. Mr. Russell did come with his list of 4,000 voters. It was presented to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections voted to challenge all 4,000 of those voters. We were one of 2 counties in Georgia that followed on to that challenge. And they did it based on my recommendation. I went and looked at some of the voters, and it appeared that some of them had perhaps moved out of state. And so I presented that information to the Board of Elections, and that 5-member board voted unanimously to challenge all 4,000 of those voters. Well, that's a logistical nightmare, on the eve, pretty much before early voting. We had already been through 1 week of early voting, and we were kind of in the middle of our 2nd week, but the state worked with me. It was amazing. They put a challenged designation beside each of those 4,000 voters, and as the voters came to early vote, if they had that challenge designation, then they had to vote a provisional ballot. The Board of Elections was then sued. Don't know, I forget the parties to the suit, but the Board of Elections was sued saying you can't do list maintenance this close to an election. List maintenance is precluded in federal legislation, won't allow us to do it a certain period of time before an election. They called it list maintenance, but we rebutted and said, no, it's not list maintenance. It's only asking the voter, look, we think you've moved out. If you haven't, then let us know. And we had them cast a provisional ballot. They had 3 days after the election to verify that ballot. Of course, we ended up in federal court, as you talked about. And so we added the challenges. We went through a couple of days, maybe even a week, with those challenges added and with people casting provisional ballots. Went to court, said, no, you've got to remove those challenges. We removed the challenges again. We appealed. So for those 10 days, we were adding the challenge designation, taking it away, adding it. People were casting provisional ballots regardless. For election day, those people were able to remain in challenge status, had to cast a provisional ballot, and then of course they could verify after election day if they had not moved. We had 2 voters that remained on that challenged list that the board had to.
4,000? That's awesome.
Everyone else verified. And 20 was a year of movement for people. People moved to Florida temporarily with an intention to remain here in Georgia, or move to Alabama to live with daughter, friends, whatever, but their intention was to remain here. But that postal record, they put in that change of address, a temporary change of address to Florida or to Alabama, and so it keyed that 4,000. We ended up with 2. One was a voter in Colorado who said, yeah, I did it, but I didn't know I couldn't register in Colorado and in Georgia, and I voted. And then one in Alabama, who was the situation that I just talked about. I moved here to be with my daughter during COVID. and I intend to return to Georgia.
Okay.
So,
So they were, the person in Colorado actually moved to Colorado.
yes,
Got a
and actually
Colorado.
registered in Colorado.
So I don't believe that person.
Yeah,
All right, that's just me.
Yeah.
If you're going to move, and I'm sure this person was over 18.
right, they
right?
were.
I'm sure had some, probably had more than a triple-digit IQ at some point in time. If you're telling me you're going to vote in one state and don't think you shouldn't vote in the other one, that's just my question. So now, getting to absentee ballots.
Okay,
The question here is that a person requests a ballot to be delivered in the mail, okay, via U.S. Postal Service.
yes,
Okay, we trust them, thickened through whatever they come through, rain and snow and sleet. Okay, so if the voter is getting the mail delivered from the UPS, or online, and the voter fills it out, why can't they just return the ballot in the same mailbox and have the United States Postal Service pick it up and then have it delivered if they are, quote unquote, afraid, as one local TV person, again, the theatrics is amazing.
Sure.
Sometimes I see this, oh my God, people are afraid.
yeah.
Okay, well, why can't they just do that? I mean, wouldn't it be simpler and cheaper just to provide a return postage rather than spend millions of dollars on drop boxes? And I don't know how many millions it was. I mean, here's, you've got drop boxes right there now, right? And
It's 20,000.
20,000. But I mean, when you say 20,000, I mean,
No, I didn't say that.
You're just
Yeah.
20,000 times 159
Yeah.
counties.
Right.
It adds up. So I guess, why do we need the drop boxes? Okay, since the post office clearly, and they have cameras, they got clerks, right, to verify IDs and check credit and everything else. And if the person who is the owner of the mail, like the mailbox, you know, we're allowed by checking the Georgia law, I can take my stuff and put it in my own mailbox. Some states you can't. But I didn't. I voted. I went in to vote. And it's allowed to do under federal law. And the only ones who can take something out of the mailbox are the Postal Service people. So my rationale is, if a voter doesn't have to find the drop box, then they should have that no excuse being able to vote, right? Why can't they just either do it that way? But why did we all of a sudden have to go from, I believe we do pendulum swings. We swing from one pendulum way to the other. So why did they do that?
So ballot collection drop boxes are used in states, many other states, and have been for years. I think it was
Colorado,
just
Ohio, yep.
Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah, I think it was just another tool in your toolkit as a voter if you chose to use that ballot collection drop box. Some people didn't have postage, didn't want to have to go to the, didn't want to have to request postage. Some people wanted to take out that third party between them and their ballot. They wanted to take that ballot directly to the ballot collection drop boxes. All ballot collection drop boxes were surveilled by cameras. They were at government facilities. We have the footage, and we have provided that footage, I don't know how many different times, of where the ballot collection drop boxes were located. It filmed 24/7. If you think about standalone mailboxes, if someone used a standalone mailbox, not the one at the end of their driveway, let's say you live in an apartment complex.
Sure.
You got to go to a standalone mailbox. There are no cameras on that. There's nothing there that show what goes in or what goes out of that mailbox. I had a personal experience with USPS where I mailed my daughter an absentee ballot to school. She's in Athens in law school. She didn't get it.
Great, another lawyer.
Yeah, didn't get it, and I was like, I mailed it. She said, well, what do you mean? I haven't gotten it. It was returned undelivered to the same exact address I had used for years, sending her correspondence. So the last thing about ballot collection drop boxes, and this has been fixed with Senate Bill 202, we could mail an absentee ballot the Friday before the election.
Yes.
We had to mail it.
You had
The
to mail
voter
it.
couldn't come pick it up. We had to stick it in the mail, put it in the mail to them. If they were lucky, the voter got their ballot on Monday. Well, the ballots had to be in the office by 7 p.m. Tuesday. How's that going to happen?
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Of course, that's been fixed with Senate Bill 202,
Correct.
backing up that absentee ballot mail date so that voters can get it in a timely manner. So really the only way they could bring it would be to deliver it here to the elections office by 7 p.m. on election day, or put it in one of the ballot collection drop boxes. Ballot collection drop boxes tasked our staff, especially on election night at 7 p.m., because I had to have 2 people at each ballot collection drop box at 7 p.m. to collect what was in there, to lock the box and bring them back here. And then we had to verify those ballots, signature, all of that information, get it ready for counting on election night. So, you know, it was convenient for voters, but I'm not, you know, most voters liked it, actually.
Most voters liked the ballot box drop off? Okay.
They did.
Okay. So when was the first day, what was the first time we used it? 2016?
Oh, ballot, no, 2020.
2020 was the
yeah,
first time?
first
Okay.
time.
All right.
It was an emergency
So
rule.
another new thing.
It was an emergency rule put in place by the State Elections Board, yes.
Okay.
And so Senate Bill 202 codifies the use
Correct.
of the ballot collection drop box.
Okay.
One or
One
two, yeah.
per 100,000. One, then you get 100,000 for the second one, right?
Correct. That is
Okay.
right.
Do you know which states were called as references for their respective systems? And if so, do we know which states who are compared to Georgia? Like, so in a big implementation the size of this,
Right.
reference is very, very important.
Yeah,
You don't know, right?
I don't know.
Okay. In the state of Texas, are you familiar with a guy named Brandon Hurley?
No.
So in the state of Texas, there was a guy named Mr. Keith Ingram who said that, you know, we had problems with the state of Texas, you know, with Dominion. Okay. This young man is a pretty intense guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said, this is before Dominion was even put in. He said there are so many problems with inside the Dominion, and you can look at those areas if you like, but there are so many problems inside of the Dominion areas and issues that we have that we cannot move forward with the state of Texas doing Dominion systems. Did anyone from the state that you know of contact Mr. Hurley or any other and say, these guys have problems with this Dominion system?
So I do not know at what level negotiations or discussions were conducted. I only know the evaluations of the RFP
That's
and
fair.
on the committee from an elections official standpoint. You know, there were people there with IT knowledge and disability, as I said before. I was just looking from the election implementation part.
Okay. Things are. So that's just
Right.
you can keep that one.
Okay.
But I'm again, from a procurement standpoint, people in procurement, their role is, I know them, is that references are very, very important. And if I have a system that hasn't been implemented yet, I have a contract I'm ready to sign, and someone shows me that in procurement, I'd be saying, hold on a second, this needs to be looked at. We need to contact at least this guy to find out what he's talking about in relation to Dominion before they implement it.
So wouldn't procurement cull those out though before
That's-
they ever sent
that's my-
to the eval team to look at?
That's my point,
Right.
is that anybody in procurement,
Yes,
and I know that maybe a Raffensperger or a Gabe Sterling or somebody else in DOAS,
right,
I'm really concerned that they didn't do that.
right.
And they didn't do any reference checking. That really concerns me on a $107 million contract, largest in the state's history, right? Okay. So the question is, why did Georgia select the system that Texas rejected? I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's a red flag to me. Because the award was dated July 30th, 2019. And then we had some issues specifically with Dominion Product Suite and a small company called
Pro VMV.
VB, right? Testing in Huntsville. Which is a bit odd because when I read that Mr. Raffensperger had said Pro VNV did the testing, did the testing audit for the contract, and then it looks like SL1 did it, the testing and in the audit, which then led to the case I'm sure what you know about with Judge Stoltenberg. Because I read that whole case and I was surprised. Not surprised. I was kind of shocked that a Pro V&V, who's got 3 people in it, 4 people in the whole company, okay, 5 people in the whole company, out of Huntsville. I know they're an EAC
They are, yeah.
tested,
Approved.
verified company, approved
Right.
company, right? But, and then I was shocked to find out that their Pro V&V is pretty much a Dominion company, is only takes care of Dominion stuff. Were you aware of that?
No.
Yeah.
They only evaluate?
They pretty much only evaluate and test Dominion products.
So not HART, not ESNS, not...
Yeah. And it's interesting because I did some data around that. There's two people that worked for Pro V&V that were really focused on the Dominion side of the house. And I guess I'll have to ask Mr. Raffensperger that question because he said that it was tested and by Pro V&V, and it wasn't. It was tested by SL1. And then when you had the problems, if you remember, you had the problems before the implementation with the patches and with Judge Totenberg's discussion. I mean, she basically said, yeah, we got some problems here, but I'm not going to stop the new election software. I thought that was crazy, but what do I know? I'm not a judge, right? So are there any, would you say, if I said this statement to you, do you think EAC is too closely embedded with vendors at all?
I don't.
Or some vendors, maybe?
But I wouldn't have that level of knowledge so much.
Okay.
But no.
Could you see it? Could you see where there could be problems or embedded
Where
with?
the EAC only certifies,
Yeah.
or through NIST and all of that,
Yeah.
and VBSG only certifies certain vendors?
Yeah. See, if it was me,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to have just one company. Well, SL1 was the vendor of choice for Dominion, and then Pro V&V came back afterwards and started doing it. Now they're pretty much exclusively doing Pro V&V, doing Dominion. So I just think that's something that I think EAC should look at. If you're saying you're a testing organization, you should be testing for all organizations. Me, I would imagine. Getting back to the election integrity issue stuff, this is where the 2020 again comes into play, Andy. Recently, Secretary Raffensperger announced there were 35 cases moving forward around election fraud. And what baffles me is when I read some of these cases, it is now that we are just going after them, meaning they happened in 2016, 2017, okay? That's over 5 years ago. So what takes it so long when you have 35 cases that the secretary has said, yeah, we're going to go after these people? Why does it take 5 years to go after these people, round them up? I guess they got to get lawyers, they got to get their own things, you have to go in front of a judge, blah, blah. I mean, if the election fraud happened and we have a verifiable case that happened that day, why does it take 5 years?
So the only thing I can guess is that there has to be a complaint made. That complaint has to be investigated by the investigators. The investigators submit a report to the State Elections Board.
Sure.
State Elections Board either says, no, it's not a case, or they refer it to the Attorney General for further investigation. And then at that point, when it comes back up, you know, it's when the Attorney General's office finishes their investigation.
Sure.
So the only thing I can guess from the 2016 and 2018 cases is that perhaps, you know, it got remanded to the Attorney General for further investigation, and they're awaiting that, the outcome of that investigation. When you do an investigation, you have to talk to all the poll workers involved, the voter involved, and, you know, it takes a little bit of time, but I don't know why they would be doing investigations from 2016. I do know that probably they received quite a few complaints that they have to follow up on. I know I just submitted reports for 2 that happened in 2020 where a voter alleged that one of my poll workers told her she voted for the wrong people and put her ballot to the side. But she left the polling place. And you know, I asked the investigator, yeah, how am I supposed to investigate that?
Exactly.
You know, I'll get a statement from the poll worker, and then,
Correct.
you know, he asked me if the poll worker would have specific knowledge of this person. When you process 1,000 people
Right.
a day for 3 weeks, you're not going to have specific knowledge. And ultimately, the voter has to bear some, I don't want to say responsibility, but if someone took my ballot and put it to
yeah.
the side, I would be like, oh,
Yeah.
whoa. No, you take my ballot and you put it through the machine, or you call a supervisor, right over here. So, you know, I think it's complaints like that bog them down quite a bit. You know, collecting those statements from people,
Sure.
and then submitting that report, and then the report goes to the state elections board.
And I'm not concerned about the claims. I'm concerned
Sure.
about the amount of time it takes.
Right.
So I understand there's 23 people that work inside this group just doing fraud investigations.
I
There's
can believe
23
that.
full-time people.
Yeah, because they
Okay?
brought in the GBI, they brought in all kinds of people.
So that's, I mean, I don't know how much those people make. Let's say
Right.
they make $100,000. It's a lot of money again, right? And then I believe that Mr. Raffensperger has stated that in the last primary, he found 1,000 fraudulent votes from individuals. Have these people been sentenced yet, or are they still waiting? Are we going to find out in 2090 that these people did it and they're all dead by now? It just seems to,
Right.
I'm asking questions from the average Joe Blow voter. What happens, why does
Right.
it take 5 years? Because you know what? The 2020, I'm not a conspiracy person, but we have been hearing things, Gabe Sterling says he calls it the Internet of Cabal, which I think that was an uncalled for statement. I think his category shouldn't be saying that.
Right.
That's my personal opinion. But how do we know that there wasn't ballot harvesting going on with things we're seeing now that are starting to pop up that Raffensperger has said, okay, now we're going to start looking at it. We're going to start looking at these things. We're going to start looking at these ballot harvesting issues that happened in 2020. How do we know if that happened and if this case it's taken 5 or 6 years for these 2016 and 2015 and other people? My point is, will it be 2050 before we find out what really actually happened in 2020? Or are we satisfied, as Gabe Sterling said, this is the most perfect election in the history of Georgia?
So I think from a local perspective, there is no appetite to pursue voter issues. We had a son who signed his mother's ballot. She died, day before, 10 years ago. And we submitted it to our district attorney. Well, guess what? The district attorney back then was elected, still is. So there's no appetite to go after voter things locally. Then when you look at the state level, if there are 1,000 cases of fraud, again, it's got to go through that process. It's got to go through the investigation. It's got to go to the Attorney General's office. And
Sure.
so you might want to look at the agenda for the State Elections Board, or even find out, if you can, from the Attorney General or the Secretary where those cases might be, those cases of fraud.
Got 2 more questions for you. We're good?
Yeah.
2 or 3? 2. Maybe 2 or 3.
4.
Yeah, not 4.
Yeah, make it hard. I'm ready.
No. I hope I'm not being too hard on you. So in one of Mr. Raffensperger's press releases, he says, in the coming weeks, the Secretary of State's office will do voter outreach, inviting Georgians to interact with the new machines and ask questions. Do you know where that happened and who those people were and the voting machines and that had problems, didn't have problems? Was there any kind of data that says we did this in these conference room pilots we sent out 100,000 machines. Let's say 100 machines. And we had 100 people. And we got voter outreach and all those kind of things. Was there any report that came back and said out of these 100 people, 99 said, awesome, no problems, excellent. When we look forward to having the election day, we've already solidified this. Mr. Raffensperger can go on TV and go, hey, well, we just did 99 out of 100 people said it's awesome, it's going to be a great election. Did that happen?
So I think it did happen. Of course, I didn't participate in all of that. I might have heard some of it, but if you've ever been to a public meeting, you see how many people come to a public meeting. Unless you're offering free food or
beer.
some entertainment,
Yeah.
people just do not come to a public
Believe
meeting.
me, I realize
And you will
that,
see the same faces at every public meeting that people go to. So we saw those people who wanted the gold standard of ballots, gold standard, hand-marked paper ballots. And that really wasn't an option. The hand-marked paper ballot, can you imagine counting hand-marked paper ballots without any kind of tabulator
Yes.
in a county like Fulton?
Yes.
The other thing is voters have become so accustomed to quick results. They don't care about how the system works,
absolutely.
but how fast am I going to know?
Absolutely.
I need to know tonight. I need to know tomorrow who's going to win. That gold standard, while it may be gold of hand-marked paper ballot, how do you count it? How do you tabulate it? And even then, if we are going to protect the confidentiality of our ballot, you're still not going to sign it.
Correct.
I had people call
Correct.
and say, I want to see my ballot from
You're
the
right.
November election.
Right.
Well, how? You know, the privacy of your ballot is protected unless you sign it. Now, I've told people all along, a great solution would be for you to have to sign your ballot. And then when you get it, if you want to come see it 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, we pull your ballot, look at your signature, right?
Pull it up.
But people don't want to release that private ballot. They want that private ballot. When they find out that we can look and see what ballot you selected in a primary, what do you mean? Well, we know that you picked either a Republican or a Democratic ballot in the last 5 primaries. You know, we don't know how you voted, but we know what ballot you picked in a primary only. You know, they don't like that. So the only way you're going to have a gold standard is if somehow you designate your ballot and you know that that ballot belongs to you.
Okay.
Right?
Do you believe we have a gold standard in the state of Georgia from what happened, from the results in 2020? Do you believe there's a gold standard? And if 4 years from now, it comes back and those 35 cases from 2016 are now 100,000 cases from all the things that are floating around, what's going on. Do you believe now we have a gold standard compared to the rest of, you must touch the other 49 states. You must have discussions, meet somewhere, and Jekyll Island as a national organization and talk about problems or goals. So if you were to rate yours, and I know that the Heritage Foundation just got done doing an elections overview, but the Heritage Foundation is a Republican-run organization who says that Georgia did a great job. I don't know if they did a great job prior to that or they said afterwards. So would you say we had a gold standard?
So I don't believe there is a gold standard of voting equipment. I think it has to be a combination of everything. I think it has to be voter usability, election official usability, safety, security, ability to transport. If you think about it, we conduct an election at the most 5 days a year, and that's in a presidential election. But we've got to be able to beef up and serve 80 or 90,000 people during those 5 days.
Correct.
With poll workers who only do it at the most 5 days a year. And so I don't know that there is a gold standard because you have the human component tied into that. So with that gold standard, you have to have the proper equipment, the proper knowledge to use it, the proper knowledge for voters to understand it, and then the ability to audit it and look at it later to say, here's how we came to our numbers, here's how we looked at our numbers. I do like the fact that we have a paper ballot and that we are able to go back and look at those candidates' names. And during our recount of the presidential race here, I had 1 Republican and 1 Democrat to sit on a committee to do that recount and to place those ballots in the box for the appropriate candidate. And they got to know each other. They got to realize, well, you're not nefarious because you're a Republican, or you're not because you're a Democrat. And it was a great process. So I think you just have to be open to discussion. The voter has to take a little bit of responsibility, and then we have to, as elections officials, have to provide the best opportunity for voters to vote where they understand it, where they can verify it, and where we can recreate what they have done.
And it's great, because at the end of the day, they're the customer.
They are.
I mean, the voter's the customer from your standpoint. So
They are.
Was there a satisfaction, you guys do a customer satisfaction outreach? For instance, you're going to have we have a primary coming up. So is there some kind of outreach that's going out to all the people saying, hey, don't forget, SB 202 has made some changes, now we're doing things. So is there a statewide marketing blitz, if you will, with someone saying, here's what's changed in 202, here's the rules in 202, here's what we used to do, here's what we're doing? Because I believe you're still going to have this proverbial capital group that's going to get together, Republicans and Democrats. Oh, you took the ballot boxes out here, it's racist, it's misogynist, whatever it's going to be. I mean, I think voters are tired of hearing that. I think that the voters that I've talked to are tired of hearing that back and forth legislation, state, local, federal. So from a standard standpoint, you did a great, you gave me everything I wanted to have. And I'd hoped at some point in time that there's a federal standard that says, these at the minimum, the bare minimum, 70%, these are the things you must do. States can do your own stuff, but here's the bare minimum. And I don't know if you guys have that inside your
Right.
organization.
And we do have a bare minimum, federal standards that are provided to us, and in addition to our state and to our local laws.
About the standards, is there just minimum standards that
Yeah.
says, okay, we all have to have, every state has to fit in this box.
Right.
What you guys do outside the box is great, but you have to meet these
Yes.
thresholds.
Yes, and we do have those minimum standards, and then we have those that are implemented by the state, and then our local standards. We can't even do our redistricting or our reapportionment because the plan wasn't available 6 months before the election. We are hinged sometimes too by legislation that is passed,
Sure.
and that makes a difference.
Do you think the SB 202 is a good start or a bad ending to what happened before? There's a reason why 202 came into existence. You believe it's good, bad, or ugly?
So I think Senate Bill 202 has good, bad, and ugly parts.
Okay.
We had voters who are accustomed every January, especially our disabled and our elderly, to requesting that absentee ballot for the whole year. They marked it on their calendar because we had trained them to do that. I'm gonna request that ballot because I get it automatically. For the rest of the year, I'm gonna request it in January. Now we have to tell them, sorry, you gotta wait 78 days before the primary, which is March 7th, to be able to request that ballot. For those who are disabled and elderly, that's kind of a different change. And they're like, well, can I go ahead and submit it? And you just hold on to it. We can't do that. So I think there are good, bad, and ugly parts to Senate Bill 202. And of course, my job is just to implement it and provide voters with the best opportunity that they choose to cast their ballot.
The last question would be, inside of that, the 78 days, whatever it is from 202, how many people actually, from an ADA standpoint or from the group you just talked about, is there millions of people like that? Is there 125,000? Is there
no.
74 people? Is there
Yeah.
995,000 people? Like, I believe every county knows
Right.
who their ADA people are,
We
who the
do.
senior citizens are, blah, blah, blah. So I would think that would be a good outreach for them, just to have somebody on the phone,
Sure.
high school students,
Right.
Say, hey,
Right.
by the way, part of our, just making phone calls.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And we talk to them on the phone. We know them. It's not millions. It's not even thousands. It's hundreds.
Okay.
We talk
That's
to them, and we mail them their application back with an envelope with a stamp on it and tell them mail it back to us on March 7th. So we do, I don't want to say coddle our voters, but we do try to help them through the process because ultimately that's our objective, is to help voters in the most legal way, or let me start over on that, is to help voters cast their ballot according to their own personal plan.
That dovetails into this last part of B. So Fulton County hired Dominion for their workers. Some of these workers have got code and everything else. Are you aware of that contract? It was $450,000.
So were they employed as techs?
They were, some were techs, some were warehouse workers. So they were COVID people, right? So there's 3 or 4 contractors that were inside this organization. But Dominion got a $450,000 contract for warehouse workers and things like that, which I find odd that Fulton County, not the other counties, just Fulton County. And I believe they got a grant. Some of that money was HAVA money. And also the Southern Poverty Law Center got $150,000. They weren't even on the procurement contract. So that's a concern to me, is that Dominion Software, who's the vendor of choice, all of a sudden got a contract worth $450,000 just for Fulton County.
So was it a contract from Fulton County or a contract?
It was a Fulton County, it was from Fulton County. And of all the temporary firms out there, they have Happy Faces and 2 or 3 other companies. Dominion got a contract for $450,000. I think someone should have, to me, that's a red flag issue if you're saying we're going to go outside, we're going to use the vendor to also do tech and warehouse stuff, when opposed to having someone local in Georgia who's a local small mom and pop tech firm that could do that kind of stuff?
So tech support from Dominion was provided to every county in the state of Georgia in the 20 election cycle. So if Fulton County needed a little bit more, I'm going to go back to my initial
bit more.
comment. If Metro Atlanta doesn't do well, it
Sure.
doesn't matter what the rest of us do.
Sure.
So if they needed that 450 to be successful, selfishly, I would have wanted them to have that 450,000 to be successful.
Absolutely. And they still have problems.
Well,
To me, they still have problems. I mean,
Right.
water leaks and all that kind of stuff. In 2020, do you believe that, as Gabe Sterling said, it was the most fair and honest election in the history of Georgia?
I'm confident in the outcome of the election from 2020. And I'm confident because we did the hand recount of the ballots in Muscogee County. I'm confident of our results, and I'm confident of the statewide results. You know, anytime there's new equipment, you're always nervous, you're always concerned, but that audit component and that hand count component gave me even more security than what I might have had without that.
Do you predict if those things come out and you are wrong, how secure would you feel about the next election, which is coming up relatively soon, for the governorship and the primaries, which could turn the Senate again, and then the presidential election? What would you say to that if we came out and said, we just found out this happened?
So I think ballot harvesting can happen at any point, whether you have ballot collection drop
That's illegal,
boxes
though,
or
right?
whether, yes, you said illegal, right?
Illegal.
Yes,
Yes.
correct, it is illegal. Whether you have ballot collection drop boxes or whether you are putting that stack of ballots in a mailbox, you know, that you can have ballot harvesting, but if you get caught, it is illegal. So ballot harvesting may or may not happen. I don't want to go to jail or prison for ballot harvesting. I can't imagine anyone else that would want to do that.
That's a chain of custody issue, right? Though, if the chain of custody issue is not a one-to-one,
Right, but
and there are stacks that are going in there, that again is an illegal activity. So,
on the person
on
putting
the
them
person
in
that's
there.
doing it, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
but have you seen any of that data? Have you
No.
seen any of those?
No.
Okay. So if it comes out,
I do know about the geofencing. There was some cell point data in the geofencing that
Yes.
went on around ballot collection drop boxes in some of the metro Atlanta areas. But if you think about where those boxes were located, some of them were located at libraries, city services center, government center. You know, employees coming to work, that cell phone's going to ping 5 days a
agree with you.
week.
3 o'clock
Yeah,
in the morning.
so I don't know that.
I don't know how many people are working at 3 o'clock in the morning at the library, but
Well, true.
if they are, I'm not saying they are.
Sure, yeah.
But if there is ballot harvesting and it goes at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
someone's to ask the question, why 3 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
But-
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate your time.